Welcome to today's lunch session, sponsored by the law firm of Riggs, Abney, Neal, Turpin, Orbison, and Lewis, in partnership with Legal Shield. Please welcome co-chair of the National Tornado Summit from the NOAA, National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center, Warning Coordination Meteorologist, Dr. Patrick Marsh.
Sheepish when my title takes longer to say than anything else I have prepared to say. So, all right. So welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed this morning's breakout sessions. Please feel free to continue eating as we get started with this program and our wonderful lineup of speakers this afternoon. Just a few reminders. You must complete each session you attend in order to receive continuing education credits. If you need to leave the session for an extended period of time or leave early, you'll unfortunately not receive credit. We will have volunteers at each door tracking the CEUs, so make sure to get your badges scanned. Also, do not miss your chance to visit our expo throughout the second floor, sponsored by Farmers Insurance. And as you use the hashtag NTS2019, you'll see your postings on the screens prior to each session. Also, remember to go to www.slide.do and enter event code NTS2019 and click join. Here you can ask questions of our speakers. There's a complete listing of the sponsors in your program. Let's give all of our sponsors a round of applause. And enough with my speaking, so let's kick off this session. Please welcome our launch sponsor from Riggs, Abney, Neal, Turpin, Orbison, and Lewis, Robert Nance, and from Legal Shield, Mark Nelms.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Nance from the Riggs Abney Law Firm here in Oklahoma City. We want to welcome all y'all to Oklahoma City and to lunch. Here in Oklahoma, you know, the wind comes sweeping down the plain, and all y'all know that wind isn't always kind to you, or we wouldn't be having a tornado summit. As we've seen the terrible tragedy in Alabama and Georgia just in the last couple of days. So you all are to be commended for helping people prepare for storms and disasters in advance, or to minimize weather-related storms, to respond to those kind of disasters, and to compensate people for losses when they occur. At Riggs Abney, we have the privilege of doing some work for Commissioner of Insurance Glenn Mulready. The Commissioner campaigned on a platform of consumer protection, wanting to make sure that insurance companies are safe, sound, and financially healthy so they can help folks in disasters or other times of need. At Riggs Abney, we've been privileged to work on other public interest things for the state of Oklahoma, as well as for our corporate clients and our individual clients. But the most consequential work we get to do is for over 33,000 Oklahomans who are members of Legal Shield, and a like number of people up in Colorado. We've been privileged to be the Legal Shield provider firm for over 30 years, and we've helped a lot of Legal Shield members land the golden opportunities in their life and to recover when the storms of life blow them around. We're happy to sponsor lunch today, and I'm not going to hold up lunch any longer than this. But I do want to introduce my colleague, Mark Nelms, a former Riggs Abney shareholder and the current Assistant General Counsel of one of Oklahoma's prime corporate citizens, headquartered in Ada, Oklahoma, Legal Shield.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate very much the opportunity to help host such a great event. Being from Oklahoma, appreciate very much the issue of tornadoes, what's been going on in the southeast part of the United States. I was with Riggs Abney for most of my career. I had the privilege of being able to provide services for Legal Shield members every day. You know, the company actually was founded over 45 years ago in Ada, Oklahoma. Most of us now know of Blake Shelton. I actually got to go to his concert a couple of weeks ago. But really at the time, legal plans were a new idea in the United States. And identity theft wasn't really even an issue, obviously, at the time. And so I'm very proud of Oklahoma and our history, and now with our company, and what we get to do for individuals, families, and businesses, because we, like yourselves, help protect them every day from certain, maybe it is a disaster, maybe it is a large legal need they have, or an issue with their identity. Most people understand the need for identity theft protection, but I wanted to just bring up real quick in my last moments here to talk about access to justice, because this is really dear to my heart. And it's amazing after all these years, now states, really just in recent years, have developed commissions, and these have been developed through state Supreme Courts. And what they have found is everyday citizens in all your states don't really have access to the legal system. And the two main barriers to that are cost and also, where do I turn? Where do I go if I have a legal need? And so I'm very proud of our company, because as long as we've been doing this, we help people have access to law firms like Riggs Abney here in Oklahoma. And we're now in all 50 states and 4 provinces in Canada, and also now in the UK. So I appreciate very much what you do. I appreciate what we get to do every day in helping to protect individuals, families, and businesses. And I just want to welcome you to Oklahoma and hope you have a great rest of your conference. Thank you.
Okay. Moving along, our sponsor for the general session is Liberty Mutual Safeco Insurance. Here to introduce our presenter, please welcome Stephen Major.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Major. I'm the Regional Director for Liberty Mutual Business Lines for the state of Oklahoma. Liberty Mutual's promise is to our customers is to provide protection for the unexpected. We exist to help our customers embrace today and confidently pursue tomorrow. Liberty Mutual is a proud insurer, ranked 68 on the Fortune Top 100 in U.S. companies. We are the 5th largest global property and casualty insurer, and we're proud to have been a sponsorship for the National Summit since the inception. It is my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker. At the Home Depot, he is responsible for the coordination, facilitation, and oversight of the company-level response to all emergency events which affect the Home Depot locations or associates. He oversees the Global Security Operations Center and, when activated, the company's Emergency Operations Center to appropriately address any emergency event to ensure the response works in coordination with both private and public sector entities. Please help me welcome the Director of Corporate Security, Emergency Preparedness, and Business Continuity for the Home Depot, Jeff Parton.
All right, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, fantastic. I drew the short straw and get to speak to you as you're trying to eat a salad and a piece of chicken or whatever. It's fantastic. I'll try not to bore you too much. So one of the things that I wanted to point out before I get started, let me go ahead and thank the commissioner, his wife who was here earlier, and of course Adrian for coordinating my arrival and participation in this event. Now, how I got here is a very interesting process. Last year, we had some partners with Build SOS who were in our corporate office, partnering with some of our pro folks, and they happened to be there during our Hurricane Command Center, during the hurricanes, I forget which one, so Florence or whichever. So they came to the command center and we had some conversation, and then after the fact, Chuck reached out to me and said, hey, you know, this may be a venue of some interest. So thanks to Chuck and the Build SOS folks for connecting me with Adrian. And what I want to do today is just share with you just a little bit of information about how Home Depot responds to emergency events, whatever they may be. So one of the things that we have to bear in mind is that the public sector, meaning companies and non-government organizations, have to work in concert with the private sector and public sector have to work together, okay? In the end, it's imperative that we understand what each does so that we can effectively respond to the community. So let me move through some slides. You'll bear with me, I'm a moving target when I speak to a crowd, so I'll move around a lot. My apologies to you. So what we want to talk about today is largely around what really is preparedness and partnering. We'll touch base on our Emergency Operations Center, some of the decision-making steps that we go through, the private and public sector interaction and the importance of these partnerships and relationships, and efforts between these entities. And the number one thing that we probably want to talk about, or two top things we want to talk about, are taking care of our people and our community responsibility. Because in the private sector, I know this may sound crazy. We're a company, we sell things, right? Just like Walmart or HEB or any other entity that is a business. But when it comes to emergency response, you have to put all that aside and say, what is our motive? The motive is taking care of our people and getting the communities back to some degree of normalcy as soon as possible. So the business piece of it is irrelevant to an emergency management person in the private sector. We're primarily concerned with taking care of our associates and by extension their communities that they live in. So here's the obligatory propaganda slide. Yes, when you see this, you know you have some idea of what this stands for. So yes, we sell materials that are relevant to disasters. You got to rebuild something, you're going to go to one of a few places that has what you need to rebuild. But what we want to make sure that we portray during our conversation today is that we're really not concerned as much about the business as we are about our brand. So what does a brand mean for us? That means that the communities think of us as something other than a place that sells hammers or shingles or whatever the case may be. So when I was preparing the presentation, one day I was walking down the hall in our corporate headquarters, and there's a sign on the wall that says, you know, we're One Home Depot. And it has representations of a lot of various brands and different pieces of the organization. And I wanted to point it out because it's important that we, in response efforts, focus on the people regardless of the platform that they work in. So we have Home Depot stores with which you are most familiar, and then a number of other subsidiaries and other businesses. What does this really mean when it comes to a disaster? The hurricane or tornado or wildfire or flood or whatever the case may be does not differentiate. So in our response efforts, neither do we. So even within my own company, I spend a great deal of time talking to the different functional groups and trying to explain to them you cannot solely focus on your piece of the response, nor can you solely focus on stores that sell things. It has to be all of our properties where we have any human capital at all. So based on our footprint, which is let's see, today 2,286 stores, just over 100 in Canada, similar number in Mexico. And in addition to that, about 300 what we call non-product facilities, but there are, supply chain as well. So in the end, it's roughly 25, just a little bit over 2,500 properties around North America. What we want to illustrate by giving you this number is not that our size, not that we're not necessarily the biggest thing in the world. Actually, Jason's organization is much larger. So Walmart by footprint covers a great deal more real estate, all right? In the end, it's not the amount of real estate you cover, but what you do in your actions that take care of your people, regardless of where this real estate lies. So last year we had all kinds of emergency activity around the country, and we respond to it in different ways. But we wanted to illustrate that we see all manner of activity throughout the United States. So this slide, provided to us by our early alert partners in concert with the NOAA folks as well, illustrates the disaster types that we encountered last year. Bear in mind, this was through September, so yes, we are missing a hurricane, all right? But what we want to point out is, and to be quite honest, I don't really care what kind of disaster it is. We have to respond with equal support regardless. All right, let's get the obvious out of the way. We're familiar with tornadoes. All right? A few years ago, we had a significant action take place that directly impacted one of our properties, and that was the result. Many of you were involved in response efforts to that, I'm sure, or have encountered similar scenarios. In the end, there were a lot of lives that were saved, and they were saved specifically by some things that were in place at the time. One of the things that we utilize is a weather alerting service, a provider that monitors our properties by longitude and latitude. I'm not a meteorologist, but from the way I understand it all, they receive a feed from our National Weather Service partners and package it in such a way that it reflects specific information to our properties. By utilizing this service, we were able to issue a warning to the store manager locally on the ground and provide them with specific instructions ahead of the impact of this tornado. Many lives were saved as a result. So this is something, and obviously if you want further information about this, we'll be glad to speak with you offline and elaborate a little bit further. So when we have a significant event, such as a hurricane, and just to be quite honest about it, hurricanes are really a media darling, right? They're sexy and they get a lot of press. You get warnings, so you got enough time to build things up and get a lot of emotions going and drive ratings. I get it. What we don't want to do is act on this emotion. So we want factual information, and we want to be able to communicate directly to our assets in the field throughout the geography, and we want to in turn take that information into our command center and be able to apply appropriate resources. So in short, I know there are some emergency managers in the room, right? So short version is I've set this up to resemble your EOCs where you have ESFs and representatives from multiple groups to take in intelligence and as a result send resources to the appropriate areas. That's the short version. Now, what do I really do in an emergency scenario? I tell everybody, I get asked a lot because there's a lot of pieces to my role. Hey, what's your job? And when I try to explain it to them, I used to try to explain it to a lot of people, and I really got over that in short order. And I just tell people, well, my job is to manage emotion and broker information. That is my job. So within our company, and I don't know about within your organizations, there are a whole lot of personalities. There are a whole lot of different agendas, and there are many, many different ways that people manage or deal with stressful scenarios. So part of my role is to be essentially as emotionless as possible and calm people down. So I tend to probably have some degree of success with that because, frankly, I live with 2 teenage daughters, and there is always a tornado warning or a hurricane warning. And so if every day is a tornado warning, no day is a tornado warning, right? It's all relevant. So during an emergency event, say a hurricane, for example, will essentially occupy a great deal of real estate within our corporate office. I make a phone call, we kick some people out of what is traditionally an education floor of our building, and then we hijack those rooms for an undetermined amount of time until we have successfully addressed the scenario. We bring in representatives from all across our organization in every functional area that you can imagine, because we want a physical representation to discuss the needs that may arise from our stores or other properties. So in decision making, we try to think through and say, well, what do people really want? Now, in the end, if you want to know the truth, what people who have been impacted by some disaster really want is to get back to their normal life. They want to return to normal, whatever normal is. They want a sense of security and comfort. They want to go home and put their fuzzy bunny slippers on and sit in their recliner. I don't know, whatever it may be for them. So we try to take into account how do we get them back into their fuzzy bunny slippers. We want our stores and our facilities to be there and be prepared and be open. Large facilities such as ours, Walmart, H-E-B, even Lowe's, become meeting places for the community. People are just naturally going to show up in our parking lots. So we try to think through how can we best capitalize on that for the benefit of the community. So in many cases, actually, a lot of your insurance mobile units have spent plenty of time in our parking lots, I'm sure, as well as in some other large retailers' parking lots, right? So what's the point in that? The point is that in order for you to be able to effectively utilize and capitalize on your resources in whatever function you operate in, you have to have a conversation. You have to understand and build those relationships. And typically, as emergency managers in the room who work for the public sector will say, it's probably best to establish a relationship before something terrible happens. So it's important to spend some energy in learning as much as possible about what other entities have to offer. So our associates expect us to handle their pay and benefits. They don't really care if a tornado just struck. They don't really care if a hurricane's coming. They still want to get paid, right? So they also have come to expect credible information. As a business or as a leadership entity, it's our responsibility to provide as much credible information as possible. No offense to the Weather Channel or any other media outlet, we're not in the business of creating any type of emotion. We're in the business of managing factual data. For me personally, a disaster is an equation to be balanced. So as long as I have as many data points as possible, I can balance the equation. What does the community expect? They expect us to help with recovery. And they expect us to set the example. When I say we, not only the Home Depot, but anybody who's in an organization that's responding. Nobody that's a victim or has been impacted by some significant event wants to go to someone in an official capacity and have that person freaking out. Right? Manage the emotion. So on a couple of slides here, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share with you a couple of slides that I provide to internal customers that staff our command center. Every year we have some meetings and training, and so I'll bring folks in and just say, hey, these are some things that we need to remember, and here's some processes that we want to make sure happen effectively. So when we have a command center activation, or even if we don't have a command center, but yet there is some type of issue to address, we typically will have conference calls between all the levels of field leadership and the corporate command center. So when I say field, I apologize, but I typically use that term loosely to describe our stores and our business elements out in the United States someplace. So we want to make sure that all the questions have been answered that they might have. If they've been impacted, we want to hear what they have to say, answer their questions, and provide the appropriate resource so that we are being efficient in our response. One of the things that I try to insist on within our company is that we have specific points of contact in specific areas. If we have a need for, say, merchandise, then in our field element, we have a specific point of contact on the ground who will coordinate with a specific point of contact in our command center. That way, we don't have cross communications and multiple people issuing the same requests and so forth. So we also have an opportunity when we have a command center to have regular cadence of conference calls and updates be provided both from the impacted area to the command center and the reverse. We do not get on the eternal conference call in the middle of a crisis. It's a total nuisance, and it wastes a lot of time and really does nothing except create a lot of undue emotion. So we have a very rigid program that we follow. I want to hear from the bosses of each functional group, and then we're done. We establish the time for the next call, identify what we need to do, and we move on. So within our command center, I spend a great deal of time running around to different functional groups and asking them to provide whatever room they're in with an update of what they're working on. Why would I do that? Because human nature says that we're focused on our thing, whatever that thing may be. If I'm a merchant and I'm really worried about how many generators I'm going to get someplace, that's all I'm really thinking about. If I'm a human resource person, all I'm really concerned about is what am I doing for my associates? If I'm a payroll person, all I'm really concerned about is how am I going to pay these people? You follow my line of logic here. So the reason that we have these updates is so that each functional group can let the others know what they are working on so that we do not duplicate efforts. Does that make sense? All right. So what about partnerships? This is a very interesting topic, and for many years we've talked about public-private sector partnerships in many, many seminars, meetings, so forth and so on. Anybody heard this topic before somewhere? Yeah? All right. What does that really mean? It means that we need to partner amongst ourselves. When I say ourselves, I mean private sector people need to understand what resources are available and what roles other private sector entities play. We also have a responsibility to understand what do our public sector partners do during an emergency and vice versa. So while the emphasis on partnerships, in the end, when a disaster takes place or a natural, disaster event or any type of emergency event happens, our responsibility collectively is to restore that community. This is not new news. This is nothing new in the universe. But how best to do that? So in our company, we're a little, entrepreneurialish. I'm from Tennessee, so I'd say cowboyish, right? And so everybody's running wild, and everybody wants to do everything for everybody right this second. Partnerships are essential if you do not want to compete for finite resources at the site of the impact. Everybody follow what I'm saying? When something terrible happens, there are finite resources physically present. So as Home Depot, we do not want to get into the business of providing cots and cooking meals for the community kitchen and all these things that are outside our particular area of expertise. We have partners that do that. We support those. Team Rubicon, Red Cross, Convoy of Hope, so forth and so on, right? Now, there are many things we do provide for the communities that are part of our core initiatives and our core values. We send a lot of volunteers into the communities to help clean up and that sort of thing. That's just part of being a strong corporate citizen, okay? But what is important for us, both in public and private sector, is we have to spend some energy beforehand and understand what options are available, what resources are available, and how do we partner effectively before something takes place. Community responsibility is, in large, what I've talked about already, but it's a little bit deeper than that. Everybody always thinks of, I got to go to Home Depot to buy something. Well, guess what? Our associates, of which there are currently just over 500,000, it fluctuates. We're coming into the spring season, so it'll go up a little bit. We consider our associates our number one priority, by extension, their communities that they live in. So our stores, we selfishly do not view our stores as just buildings. We view our locations as members of the community because we spend a great deal of energy trying to reach out to the local officials, the local population, and essentially making them aware that we are there should they need assistance, and we want to work together to get the community back on its feet when it is negatively impacted. So, another obligatory propaganda slide. Here we go. I love these. Last year, obviously, we had some issues around the country, hurricanes, wildfires, and we donate to some degree, and a lot of volunteer hours and so forth and so on. All the big companies have similar programs, right? Just for the record, we communicate directly with our peers or our counterparts in other business organizations. I talk to the Lowe's guy. I talk to Jason at Walmart or Justin at HEB or Best Buy or Target or whoever. In the emergency management world, we do not have any time for competitiveness. It serves no purpose. Here, the keys to the kingdom, I guess, are gone. That's fantastic. Not really. Oh, here they are. Keys to the kingdom are none. You're done. That's it. Game over. So this is a slide that I share internally with my support personnel in all of our departments. I share them with you. You can take with them what you would like, and if it's not applicable, I apologize. But there are some basic things. Here's what I have observed in some time. So I've been privileged to be part of the Home Depot's emergency response for 17 years. And during that time, we made a lot of changes, and I found that we unnecessarily just complicate things beyond belief. And when a disaster happens, everybody wants to be involved, and it becomes such a train wreck, it becomes unmanageable, right? So over time, I have been fortunate enough to gain some traction, and for whatever reason, people there have started to come to me for some degree of guidance. And here's what I tell them: if you're in a business, you're gonna encounter one of these three things. When a disaster takes place, something is going to affect your brand. Something is going to potentially affect your inventory or your P&L. If you do not have inventory, still your P&L could be negatively impacted, but above all, your brand, all right, your reputation. So all issues that we encounter in emergency scenarios will affect one or more or a combination of these three things. I hadn't figured it out if they do not. If something new out there, I'm eager to learn it. This is what I tell the folks at Home Depot when we get ready to start. We have to manage emotion. You hear me say that a lot. I promise you, for us, this is the number one priority, right? We can't effectively take care of our people if everybody is running wild, as plain as I can put it. We have to manage the emotion of not only ourselves, but of those around us, and even down to the store level or location level. Shoppers don't want to come into our stores, don't want to come to our place at all if our own people are exhibiting signs of duress. How about that? So it is important to communicate with partners and other organizations and avoid competing for finite resources. I promise you, this finite resource thing is an issue. So it is important to understand who does what and what capabilities are available. This is something that I tell all of our folks, and I promise it is not in my character to do otherwise. Be right or be wrong, but never be indecisive. In the emergency management world and dealing with people under duress, indecisiveness is your enemy. So I will be more than happy to make a ton of mistakes, which I have, by the way, rather than be indecisive. This is something just to think through. In summary, what does all this really amount to? We have to be ready. And here again, this is a slide that I show internally to our people. Being ready for us is update whatever plans you may have, whatever volunteer list you might need to staff your response efforts, so forth and so on. When requested, be there. Be responsive. So responsive is a big deal in the private sector world, particularly in retail or in business, particularly to people under duress. The last thing we want is someone under duress or in an emotional state because they've been impacted, is to have to wait around for a long time on an answer or to get any kind of response at all. Be accountable. So in our company, if we become aware of an issue that needs to be addressed, it's imperative that whoever becomes aware of it ensures that it goes to fruition. All right? Oh, manage the emotion. I didn't see that one coming. Act responsibly and make decisions based on credible facts. No offense to all the media platforms and all television networks and so forth, but our decisions are intentionally not based on media information. That's why we have our early alert partners connected with us to provide us with information that is location specific. It's just an equation to be balanced, okay? What does it all really mean? That pretty much sums it up. We are prepared or we are not. So the question is, you ask yourself, what does that mean for me to be prepared? You have to answer that for your own self and your organization. If anyone would like to have conversation about it, then this is beneficial. In the end, all right, social media is great, don't get me wrong, all right? I think I might have put some social media things on the bottom of these pages at some point. Truth be told, in the emergency management world, or at least in Jeff's emergency management world, social media to me means a handshake and a conversation. All right? Because the last thing I want to be during the middle of an emergency is some other person calling somebody on the phone or sending you a tweet or a text or whatever. I got a lot of people that monitor that sort of thing because they're good at it. I am not. I would much rather have a conversation and understand what you do on a day-to-day basis and how that will play into the total community response. All right? All right. For the sake of simplicity, and so that I don't have to carry around a wheelbarrow full of business cards, there is my contact information. And just to show you what kind of jerk I am, the contact information below is Ladd Fullerton, who is seated right up here at this table, who is now on my team, and we're both available to answer questions or partner with you in whatever degree. In the end, it is not complicated. It should not be complicated. And to uncomplicate a disaster response or emergency scenario, it begins with a conversation. Does that make sense? Who's got a question? I bored you for a long time.
Thanks, Jeff. I actually, several questions have come in using the Slido app, so if you don't mind,
Sure.
I'll give you some questions that have come in.
That's frightening.
So the first question is, what type of training do you provide to your employers to help prepare them to help in-store customers when a disaster strikes?
That's a very good question, and it's important, excuse me, if you have public-facing facilities to think through what you are going to provide to them. Earlier, I mentioned that when we had the tornado in Joplin several years ago, right? We were fortunate enough to have a weather alert system in place that provided tornado warning to the store manager and other leaders, not only at that location, but also in other locations. In that email, in that notification, are very basic steps to say, for example, it was a tornado, right? Your location's under a tornado warning. Take the following actions, 1, 2, 3. Bring people inside, so forth and so on. Now, that was designed and created in collaboration with Early Alert, our weather provider. And frankly, we wanted to make it as minimalist as possible to address an immediate situation. Outside of an immediate situation, we do provide very clear guidance on emergency scenarios and various SOPs and other documentation.
A couple more questions have come in. What's the best way for communities to partner with Home Depot disaster preparedness and recovery efforts?
Let's see. That last slide I just showed you when I threw Ladd under the bus, there you go. I tell you what, the best way for, oh, thanks a lot. Yeah, there we go. Wow, that's brutal. The best way is really to have like I say, have the conversation. If you're in the public sector, obviously, I mean, our company's huge. We've got government relations people everywhere, blah, blah, blah. In the end, it starts with a conversation with someone and within our company, right? Whoever it may be. And if it's disaster related, it's going to end up coming back to myself or Ladd at some point. But if you're in another private sector organization, same thing. It doesn't take a lot of effort. Remember what I said, it's not complicated. Pick up the phone, send an email. I'm not so old school that I don't know how to use email. I'm down with email. I'm not tweeting or whatever the other language is or whatever, but I can use an email, right? I mean, in the end, it just requires you to say, hey, I want to understand what you do. I want to understand what you do, and then how can we work together? That does not mean come try to sell me something every 4 minutes of my lifetime. I'm sorry. It's really challenging sometimes because everybody has the answer to everything, right? We want to avoid this mentality and say, individually, we're not going to put on a cape and fly around and save the day when something bad happens. We're just going to be a piece of the total response.
Quick check, make sure we still have time. Okay. Some more questions. Don't know if you can speak to this or if you are wanting to, but how do you ensure that your suppliers don't try to take advantage of disaster vis-a-vis price gouging, et cetera?
Oh, yes, I'll be very glad to talk about that. All right. So here's the deal. Our suppliers are basically told, if you want to continue to do business with us, you don't have anything to do with prices anymore. When a state of emergency is declared, our company will immediately freeze prices in that area where an emergency declaration has taken place. It's the brand. Remember what I said, the brand, one of those three things. Price gouging is just nonsense and serves us no purpose. Even though we are a private sector business, we are not trying to make money. Truth be told, full disclosure, during hurricanes, we typically lose money because we spend an exorbitant amount of money. All right? That's not our purpose. That's not our point. The business will happen for a long time after something has. It's just business, right? We freeze prices. There will not be any price gouging, and our suppliers have absolutely nothing to do with our prices when an emergency happens. That's as honest of an answer as I can give you. We take great pains to make sure there is no question about that.
Okay. The questions just keep coming in. Popular guy here. What role does in-store risk management play in your disaster preparation?
All right. So in-store risk management, by that, that may come under several names. So maybe some people are familiar with loss prevention or asset protection. There's some different names, right? After it's all said and done, our in-store people, regardless of their group that they fall under or their functionality within the store, they're going to be doing the same things for safety's sake and precautionary measures as the rest of the store. Closing the stores down or ensuring the safety of customers, so forth and so on. Our asset protection people do not necessarily have, they're not going to be, suiting up with a bunch of tactical gear and rappelling into the store trying to figure it all out, right? We treat them no different. They're an asset in an area that's been negatively impacted, right? If we need to capitalize on an in-store team or group, we have that capacity. I have representatives from the asset protection group in our command center, and we can call on either in-house resources or off-duty officers or other tactical response groups as the scenario calls for it.
Okay, I'd like to take up just a moment for those of you who don't know. If you go on to the Slido page, I think you can actually vote for questions, and so I'm actually looking at this. So if you see a question that's been asked and you really want to see an answer, please upvote that question so that I can see that quite a few people have this similar question. So with that, kind of piggybacking off a previous question, how do you ensure that your material pipeline is not depleted?
So we're very fortunate by being a reasonably large company and having some very mature relationships with providers. Before, here again, I go back to hurricanes, right? But at the beginning of each year, essentially, prior to the historic tornado season, and especially before hurricane season, we have many locations that hold what we call canned loads. So it's essentially a tractor trailer that's crammed full of stuff, right, merchandise, that we have historically noted to be in demand when bad things happen, all right? And, as, you know, we send those in very early on, and as it progresses, the supply chain gets a little thin. Frankly, our merchants are fairly aggressive and have very strong relationships with providers, and we just typically do not have a shortage of much of anything, because between us and Walmart, we essentially hijack every essential disaster response thing that there is, right? But there is something to be said for succession of storms or multiple events happen at the same time. This does have some effect on our merchandise chain. So like in 17, for example, when you had back-to-back events. Well, when events drag on for 2 months plus, it becomes taxing. Manufacturers physically cannot make enough of widget X, right? It's just mind-boggling. But we do try to ensure that our supply chain appropriately stocks up beforehand, and then also reroutes merchandise from different parts of the country to be able to supply that sort of thing.
Thanks to everybody out there who's voting, because the questions are coming in, and I can see quite a few of you are voting. Question that has come in, and it's the top of the list right now. Do you encourage your local store managers to work in preparedness efforts in concert with local emergency managers?
Absolutely. After it's all said and done, every year when I have an annual meeting with the leaders and members of our field organizations, it is communicated ad nauseum that we encourage the store managers and local managers in these buildings, whatever they may be. It might not be a store, it could be a call center or some other non-product facility or distribution center. We want the leaders of that location to go find essentially 3 people. Go find the fire chief, go find a police chief, and go find the emergency manager for your city or county. Don't ask for anything. Tell them we don't want anything. Just tell them that we want to be there to be able to service the community, and if they need anything, they know who to call. It's all about specific points of conversation and specific points of contact. So yes, we do encourage that, and in fact, it's something that we spend a great deal of energy reminding people of its importance.
Right, thank you. On a more personal question, how does Home Depot balance the personal impacts on employees with the need to have a staff to operate your stores?
Got it. That's a very good question. So we've taken this into some consideration many years gone by and decided that our associates are the #1 priority. If they're impacted, we don't want them trying to figure out where the latest, where that pallet of lumber is. We don't even want them to come to the store. We send volunteers from other parts of the country by bus, put them up in hotels, provide them all their meals and everything we can possibly think of, gasoline for their cars, whatever we need to do, because we want the associates that are in an impacted area to focus on their families. We don't want them coming to work, so we send people to work for them. That was referenced, and you noticed one of the bullets on one of the propaganda slides said so many volunteer hours and so many volunteer associates, that kind of thing. There's a purpose for that. If you're impacted, we do not want you worrying about the store. It's not important.
Kind of a little bit of an open-ended question here. Are there any specific lessons learned from a recent disaster you'd like to share?
Oh, wow. Lessons learned. That's interesting. there are always lessons learned. And really one of those kind of ties to something you've heard me say many times, finite resources, right? So let's just say we had a hurricane scenario, and someone within our company decided or thought it would be a great idea to build a mobile home park for victims. Process that for just a second. So I have to explain this is probably not in our best interest because FEMA and other partners do that sort of thing for a living, right? The lesson I learned from that is people want to do everything for everybody, and they're in such an emotional state most of the time that they're very eager to jump to, oh, that sounds great, right? But the lesson is what our actions as a company or any entity for that matter, your actions cannot be selfish in nature and be perceived as potentially predatory. This is bad for the brand. Does that make sense? So, I mean, a lot of lessons. Guess what? You're going to spend a ton of money, and who cares? Do the right thing. That's all that really matters.
All right, so I think we'll do 2 more questions if you don't mind, and I'm going to use moderator prerogative here and ask some things that are near and dear to me. As a meteorologist, as we saw earlier with the hurricane forecasts, and the forecasts are getting better, but there's still a lot of uncertainty associated with it. And inherently in meteorology, there's a lot of uncertainty in our forecasts. How do you incorporate the uncertainty of the weather information in your decision-making process?
Wow.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. All right, so, hey, meteorology is its own science or art or witchcraft or whatever. I'm not really sure. So, a mixture of all these things. So I remind our folks in our company that just because they say it on the TV or whatever app is available, whatever the latest app is they're using to monitor, does not necessarily mean it is exactly applicable to our locations. Here again, that's why I utilize a provider that provides me with, takes the data that you guys provide and puts it in a package that's geographically specific to our locations. So let me bust the weather folks' chops for just a second. He'll love this. So when the National Weather Service issues a warning, I know in Atlanta anyway, everybody's crazy about weather, right? You know, Weather Channel's there, and so everybody's hypersensitive to weather stuff, right? So many times a warning will be issued, and on the TV, you'll see the polygon. It might be just a piece of a certain county or whatever. But on the screen, you see Cobb County is under a tornado warning, right? So like the whole freaking county. It's like 800 square miles. I don't know, you know? No, maybe not. So we take the information that comes from the National Weather Service, package it up by the longitude and latitude of our stores or our properties. So we have them all down to the 10 feet mark or something stupid. So I know that when that warning is issued through our partners and goes to the leadership and all across our organization, I know that that location has physically fallen within that warning area, right? It's not just a general warning like this whole county or, oh, the state of Georgia is under a tornado warning. Oh, okay. That's not helpful. So that's one of the things that we utilize very specific information, and that's on purpose. We certainly don't want our people to close down their stores, close down our businesses, or run screaming into the janitor closet or something because they heard on the radio that, you know, there's a tornado warning someplace.
Good answer.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry.
Got to protect the brand. He said it himself.
It's a brand, all about it. Sorry about that.
So last question, and this is by far the most popular question during this session.
Is it about my beard? Something about my beard? Okay. Just checking.
They enjoy your beard so much that they
Sweet.
want to come work with you. So how
Nice.
would somebody apply for a position at emergency management within Home Depot?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, Lad's already attempted to have me removed several times. I'll tell you, okay, full disclosure, let me just tell you this is how I ended up, or not ended up, but how I have come to be where I am now. When I first started with Home Depot, I was actually in our asset protection, well, back in that day, it was called loss prevention group. And I was actually in stores. I had a district of stores, a geography of stores that I oversaw for that specific area. Now, previously, I was in the Army and had some familiarity with bad scenarios, right? So I responded to some hurricanes while I was there. In I think one of the questions earlier was about how we utilize risk or whatever. And so I was the guy that got people together and said, hey, we have to go here and see if we can make sure and corral nonsense. And so over time, they asked me to move to the corporate office into a safety role. I have no idea why. I'm the most unsafe person in the world. I still can't figure it out. So I moved to the office at such point where very few weeks later, they had a reorganization within the company. You know how it goes, restructuring. What do you call it? RIF, whatever, who knows? Whatever language you use. And so they canned the guy that was over crisis management. That's what they called it at the time. Promptly called me in the office and said, hey, you were in the Army, right? Yeah. You responded to hurricanes, right? First responder and all that? Yeah. Congratulations, you now own crisis management for the company. That's how I ended up in it, right? Now, I didn't have a clue what that meant because I was used to responding at a local level and doing basic things on the ground or whatever. So over time, I had to figure out, what does this look like in terms of a total company response? It's evolved over many years, and so it's, every year you learn something new. Now, to answer, sorry for the digression, to answer the question. From time to time, we may have a position available, at which point we'll post it online, HD careers, blah, 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 blah. The truth of the story is, just like in any of your worlds, how are you going to know when something opens? Guess what? Hopefully you've had a conversation with some boss somewhere or some person in an organization that you've had some interest in, and you have established relationships. Guess what? Then you're still going to have to apply online for whatever company, it's formality. But the key to it all is you have these conversations, you understand what's going on elsewhere. Does that make sense? Sorry for the lengthy response there.
Thank you very much, and let's
Thank you
our
for your
speaker.
time. You need to just...
Okay, and so that pretty much brings us to a close for this lunch general session. We've got a few minutes before the next session starts, so please enjoy the breakout sessions and break later this afternoon, sponsored by Allstate Insurance. As we go to our next sessions, please visit our exhibitors out in the hallway, and we'll see you back here for the afternoon general session. Thank you.